Morning glory and evening grace, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I don't think I have ever seen a more egregiously handled political story than that concerning Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin today. Time magazine has a headline, "Criminal Scheme Will Haunt Scott Walker," which I believe to be objectively slanderous. And joining me now is Governor Scott Walker. Governor, it's great to have you on, but
Great
you must be...
Thanks for having me.
Are you boiling mad at the way that this has been handled by the media today?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, they've been a willing accomplice to the attacks against us. The truth of the matter is that people have followed any of the facts in what's happened in the last several years. They'll know that what was dumped out yesterday should not have been the headline you just mentioned from Time, but rather should be, this is the losing argument. This is the argument that lost not once but twice two judges, a state judge, a well-respected Court of Appeals judge, who was long in office before I was there, so no way connected with me, found that the arguments of prosecutors before any charges or anything else were issued were invalid, and told them to shut their case down. And then more recently, a federal judge said the same thing and actually told the prosecutors they'd be in contempt of his court if they continued any further on this, because it was not only wrong, the argument, but it was an outright violation of the constitutionally protected rights of not just me, but others who supported me. And it reminds me of a phrase Abraham Lincoln once said, that truth is generally the best vindication against slander. And my hope is eventually the truth will get out, but you'll look at some of these media outlets and they don't seem to care much about the truth.
The Michael Scher piece, and I invited him to come on the show today because I wanted to ask him specifically about a line that he writes. In the Walker case, there is an even further complicating factor. A number of judges in a number of courts, both state and federal, have yet to agree on whether or not the specific facts of coordination in this case amount to a crime. In fact, he is wrong. They have all agreed that it does not, and that it is a malicious prosecution. He's flat out 100% wrong.
There's not a one in a state or federal court, so it's not a matter of jurisdiction. You've had consistently the same argument, and in fact, the federal judge who made the more recent ruling last night lashed out at the prosecutors again, and said essentially that the prosecutors were trying this case in the court of public opinion because they failed to have a case in his court according to the law. So it is one where this isn't just a matter of them, pondering this. No charges were issued. This case, the reason a John Doe in Wisconsin is put in place, it's a bizarre law to begin with. It's all done in secret, but they have to take it before a judge before they can even issue charges, and the judge shut them down. This case has been shut down not once but twice. It is one where it is filled with mischaracterizations and outright lies, and it's one in which the media is a willing accomplice of the left, not only in my state, but across the country.
Now, last question before I switch topic on you briefly. Would you consider suing Time for slander? This is really a slanderous news story.
Oh, I think the biggest thing we're going to do is push back hard and make the case that, I think more so than making it in court is making proving this. Next week comes, the next week comes. We're going to keep pushing back on Time, the Washington Post, the New York Times, anybody else out there to say, let's have the story about where the rest of the story is, as Paul Harvey used to say. Let's have the rest of the story here. And before I think we can pursue anything else like there, we're going to try and make the case to give them the chance to go out and fill in the rest of the story that's yet been untold.
They ought to actually correct this. The Scher story is an abomination when it comes to journalism. Now I would like to change the subject to another person who might be running for president, and it's former Secretary of State Clinton. I know you're busy running a state and your own campaign for re-election, Governor Walker, but have you seen any of her appearances thus far?
I haven't seen the appearance. I've only heard about them from other folks out there. But I think it's, the one thing that surprised me the most, because the Clintons generally are pretty smart folks, was that at least politically, was the statement about being broke. And I think it's similar to statements I've heard from other folks in Washington, where there's just this kind of void you hear from people in Washington where it's kind of an echo chamber. They just listen to each other, and it's horribly out of touch with where the rest of the country is at. And I know as a governor, I was just in the middle of my state in Brownsville, a small construction company. I was earlier today up in Prescott, in the northwest part of our state. I started out my state capital in the morning. As a governor, you got to go out and talk to real people every day. and hear about their dreams, their wishes, their concerns out there. A lot of folks in Washington very rarely, if ever, make that connection, and I think that's going to be a challenge for her and a lot of other people like her.
She also, in regards to Benghazi, said that there are answers about some things at Benghazi, but I'm quoting now, not all of them, not enough, frankly. I'm still looking for answers. That is an admission, I think, that we have a lot to get further on the record about Benghazi. Were you surprised to hear the former First Lady and Secretary of State agree that we need more questions?
Well, I think that's just a recognition that whether she said it or not, I think most Americans realize that there are serious questions there, and you don't have to be a foreign policy expert to be concerned about that.
She's also admitted we didn't get that done in return in regards to the status of forces agreement that saw America withdraw its troops from Iraq in 2011. I know as governor, you're in charge of the National Guard. I know you deployed a lot of people out of Wisconsin to both Afghanistan and Iraq, and some didn't come back, and some came back grievously injured. What are your thoughts on watching Iraq collapse and the violent surge there because the president and the Secretary of State did not have the ability to keep an American presence there?
Well, Iraq, Afghanistan, the whole foreign policy discussion is frustrating, mainly as governor, because you mentioned I was just over at, just yesterday over talking to some of our National Guard leadership. It's incredibly frustrating. Right now, even as we speak, a lot of Americans don't realize this, but this is true not only in Wisconsin but across the country. I've got 3 units deployed, 2 from the Wisconsin National Guard and 1 out of the Army Reserve here in the state of Wisconsin. It's similar in other states out there. We've got men and women laying their lives on the line. Since 9/11, we've lost over 160, and we've had incredible numbers going over, and many have been injured. Many I've seen over at Walter Reed and Bethesda, and many others who've come home unphysically injured but have plenty of injuries that they carry with them. Those men and women completely dedicated not only to the Guard here in the state of Wisconsin, but obviously to our country, and are willing to serve. Many of them were inspired as young people not long after 9/11, but we should not be putting them in a position of being in harm's way if there's not a clear and concise agenda, a clear and concise plan that the commander-in-chief and his administration are pushing. And for a lot of us, we're very fearful of where that's headed right now.
2 final questions. Senator, then Secretary of State Clinton also said about Syria, she wanted to do more, and she pushed very hard to get that done. Quote, but as I say in my book, I believe that Harry Truman was right. The buck stops with the president. Are you surprised to see her throw President Obama under the bus for Syria?
Oh, I think it's pretty clear that, in the end, there's going to be an effort to try and distinguish herself from the president because she can read the tea leaves and see where the poll numbers are right now. But it's hard. It's pretty hard to make that argument when you were a key part of setting that policy in the first place.